winds his lines up slowly towards the boiling sun. And when I touched her skin, my fingers ran with blood.
True Detective is a thrilling fictional crime show that follows different detective stories across 5 different seasons. Season 1 was my personal favorite, and I've heard similarly from others who have watched. Season 1 follows 2 partners, Martin Hart, Marty, played by Woody Harrelson, and Rustin Cohle, Rust, played by Matthew McConaughey, as they make their way through the state of Louisiana, uncovering a long chain of occult murders along the bayou, and unraveling deeper secrets and conspiracies along the way. The show received praise when it first aired, and many were intrigued by the underlying psychological and philosophical themes surrounding pessimistic viewpoints, Christianity, cosmic horror, and psychological horror. For this video, I specifically aim to do a deep dive on Rust's character, the witty, pessimistic, chaotic good detective who mostly drives the narrative of the first season. I think right now might be a good time for a few disclaimers. The first, spoilers. I think that goes without saying. So, if you haven't seen the first season yet and would like to, please click off the video now and go watch it, and come back later to see if you might have missed anything. I originally found it on HBO, but at the time of watching it, it might be somewhere else. Either way, it's definitely worth the watch. The show does contain themes and scenes that a regular viewer might be sensitive to, so please be mindful of that beforehand. The second, I'll be discussing themes of pessimism, religion, and human consciousness in this video, and some of the philosophies that I present I might not necessarily subscribe to. All of this is my personal interpretation of the show, so please take what I say with a grain of salt. However, I will attempt to do it justice. Finally, I'll be using clips from the show, but please note this video is for educational and entertainment purposes. I'm not well versed in copyright law, but all of the clips I choose I will try to keep under 5 minutes in length. This is the first time ever making a YouTube video, so please bear with me when it comes to the video structure and quality. I try to keep everything under 20 minutes, and I don't plan on getting monetized for this. Now, so without further ado, let's get started.
People out here, they don't even know the outside world exists. Might as well be living on the fucking moon.
There's all kinds of ghettos in the world.
It's all one ghetto, man. Giant gutter in outer space.
Today, that scene, that is the most fucked up thing I ever caught. Ask you something. You're Christian, yeah?
No.
Well, what do you got the cross for in your apartment?
It's a form of meditation.
How's that?
I contemplate the moment in the garden. The idea of allowing your own crucifixion.
But you're not a Christian, so what do you believe?
I believe that people shouldn't talk about this type of shit at work.
Hold on. 3 months we've been together, I get nothing from you. Today, what we're into now, do me a courtesy, okay? I'm not trying to convert you.
Look, I'd consider myself a realist, all right? But in philosophical terms, I'm what's called a pessimist.
Okay, what's that mean?
Means I'm bad at parties.
Let me tell you, you ain't great outside of parties either.
I think human consciousness was a tragic misstep in evolution. We became too self-aware. Nature created an aspect of nature separate from itself. We are creatures that should not exist by natural law.
Well, that sounds god fucking awful, Rust.
We are things that labor under the illusion of having a self. This accretion of sensory experience and feeling. Programmed with total assurance that we are each somebody. When in fact, everybody's nobody.
I wouldn't go around spouting that shit I was you. People around here don't think that way. I don't think that way.
I think the honorable thing for our species to do is deny our programming. Stop reproducing. Walk hand in hand into extinction. One last midnight, brothers and sisters opting out of a raw deal.
So, what's the point of getting out of bed in the morning?
I tell myself I bear witness. The real answer is that it's obviously my programming. And I lack the constitution for suicide.
My luck, I picked today to get to know you. 3 months, I don't hear a word from you, and...
You asked.
Yeah, and now I'm begging you to shut the fuck up.
I get a bad taste in my mouth out here. Aluminum. Ash. Like you can smell the psychosphere.
I got an idea. Let's make the car a place of silent reflection from now on. Okay?
What should I bring for dinner?
A bottle of wine would be nice, I guess.
I don't drink.
Oh, no, of course not, Russ. Listen, when you're at my house, I want you to chill the fuck out. Don't even mention any of that bullshit you just said to me.
Of course not, Marty. I'm not some kind of maniac, right? For fuck's sake.
There's a lot to unpack in this scene. This clip is from the first episode of Season 1, and the first real time that we get to see Rust and Marty interact with one another on a meaningful level. We learn that Rust is essentially a textbook pessimist, self-admitted, and his outlook on life aligns very closely with pessimist philosophy. For this video, I'm going to compare Rust in much of his early character development to ideas presented by Thomas Ligotti and other similar existentialist philosophers. Specifically, I'll be referencing Ligotti's book, The Conspiracy Against the Human Race, quite a bit. In his book, Ligotti says that to end this self-deception to free our species of the paradoxical imperative to be and not to be conscious, we must cease reproducing. Nothing less will do. Which is almost exactly the same idea Russ tells Marty here. The phrase he uses, opting out of a raw deal, is extremely similar to Ligotti's own language, where he says we have been shortchanged. Just before, Rust explains he believes human consciousness was never supposed to be as sophisticated as it has, and in order to avert the dread caused by the realization that individuals are not special or important, humans have instead developed a programming to convince themselves otherwise. Essentially, he explains human consciousness became advantageous, helping humans survive and estrange themselves from nature, but once estranged, disadvantageous, as suddenly humans had no purpose to live, so something needed to be done in order to ensure our survival. In the first paragraph of The Conspiracy Against the Human Race, Ligotti contemplates this exact evolution of consciousness and arrives to a similar conclusion, that, quote, something would have to be done if they were to live with that which should not be. The parallels between Rust and Ligotti are striking, and this scene does an excellent job at solidifying his character. I'd like to move on in a second, but some important aspects I think should be highlighted are the references to Christianity and Rust's contemplating the Garden of Eden. The power dynamic between Hart and Cohle is also important here. Clearly, Hart holds more power in this conversation. I think it's something you should take note of. Rust's comment about tasting aluminum ash is also very easily passed up as but it will become more important to understand his character later on. All of these aspects will become relevant again in later scenes, and I find it so intriguing how a show can foreshadow almost the entire plot in a 5-minute clip. One last takeaway is that Rust isn't insane or deranged or anti-human. He just shares a different school of thought, something that many existentialist philosophers like Ligotti and Sartre, namely, have expressed in their works. Pessimism isn't anti-humanist. Instead, this philosophy aims to minimize human suffering through what some may consider uncomfortable ideas. Rust doesn't want to die. He says he lacks the constitution for suicide, and he doesn't want people to die. He actively seeks justice for those who have wrongfully suffered. All of that being said, for now, let's move on, and we can revisit some of these ideas later.
My daughter now. You know what she was spared. Sometimes I feel grateful. Doctor said she didn't feel a thing. Went straight into a coma. And then somewhere in that blackness, she slipped off into another, deeper kind. Isn't that a beautiful way to go out? Painlessly. As a happy child. Yeah, the trouble with dying later is you've already grown up. Damage is done. It's too late. You got kids? I think of the hubris it must take to yank a soul out of non-existence into this meat. And to force a life into this thresher. As to my daughter, she spared me the sin of being a father.
This scene gives us some deeper insight into Rust's life. From the way Rust talks about his daughter and how she saved him, it gives us pointers Rust hasn't always been this way. Instead, we can infer he probably changed his way of thinking after the tragic loss of his daughter. His comment on the hubris it takes to be a parent again relates almost identically to some of Ligotti's comments. Ligotti says about pessimists, to them, creation is objectionable and useless on principle. It seems so bad, so wrong, that such authority be unwisely placed into their hands. They would make it a prosecutable malfeasance to produce a being who might turn out to be a pessimist. I think some of Ligotti's other points might help us understand early Rust as a character. Ligotti borrows the work of another philosopher, Zapf, who outlines 4 strategies we use to cope with our consciousness. Isolation, essentially compartmentalization, is the first. I think Rust lacks the ability to compartmentalize, which is why he relies more heavily on the second, anchoring. Throughout the show, we learn Rust refused pension and instead asked to be placed in the homicide unit, so he would have something to focus on or ground him. We constantly see him yield to Marty in the beginning episodes, as Marty anchors him and keeps him under control, at the very least socially speaking. That was the power comment I made about the car scene. Marty holds the power to control the conversation and check Rust when he says socially unacceptable things. Marty keeps Rust present in society. This becomes clear especially after their falling out, when Rust leaves and isolates himself and slowly does more and more questionable things to solve the case, jeopardizing his own morals at the same time. Distraction is the third strategy, which I believe also ties into Rust's work and drinking problems. Finally, sublimation, which I don't believe Rust exhibits. What's interesting is Marty also exhibits these behaviors to the extreme, where we watch him hide behind his morals when talking to Rust, but openly sabotages himself, cheating on his wife, when opportunity presents itself. He uses similar strategies to not only distract himself from the tragedy of consciousness, but also of his own actions. Everything up until this point, I've basically used to establish Rust's character is based on Ligotti's works or works from similar pessimist or existentialist philosophers. Everything about his character up until this point, I mean. I'm going to pivot briefly and talk about some relevant information regarding the show for a moment. If you've watched the full season, you'll understand the occult mentions of the King in Yellow and the city of Carcosa. I had known the King in Yellow prior to watching the show, so I was certainly surprised by its mention. However, I initially thought it was simply a plot device used to drive the narrative forward. After my second watch, and after reading Ligotti, I realized the intentionality of its inclusion was much more than simply a plot forwarding device. For those who don't know, The King in Yellow is a book written by Robert W. Chambers in 1895, containing a collection of short stories about a fictional play, also called The King in Yellow. I've seen its mention resurface recently in videos, so you might be familiar with it already. As the story goes, the play was banned due to its tendency to drive its readers mad, and the collection of stories follows characters who somehow got their hands on the play and their inevitable spiral into madness. If you're curious, there's a much more involved set of videos regarding the play by Foundry on YouTube, which is how I initially learned about it. So go check them out. Anyway, what I believe is so interesting about this play being used in the show is its relevance to the human consciousness and its ability to exploit it using solely words. Without the established connection between Rust and Ligotti, the play does seem random. However, when we analyze the themes present in Ligotti's The Conspiracy Against the Human Race and compare them against the cosmic horror that has become The King in Yellow, we find many similarities. First, the idea of an evolution of consciousness and its inherent flaws. As discussed, based on the logic of Ligotti, consciousness was beneficial to our survival, that is, until it became detrimental. Both Ligotti and The King in Yellow reinforce a theme that too much knowledge, or a conscience ruled solely by fact, without the mentioned coping strategies, can and will force a person to recognize non-existence is more appealing than existence. The obvious difference, however, is The King in Yellow, as we see in the show, has a more malicious effect on its readers, while pessimism, based in existentialism, still has a positive moral and ethical foundation. Both stories relate strongly to biblical references as well, maybe one of the most striking being the tree of knowledge in the Garden of Eden, which also reminds us of Rust's mention in the first clip. Between all three philosophies, Christianity, pessimism, and madness, if you'd even call that a philosophy, share a theme of cursed or forbidden knowledge. Upon reviewing these sources, I was reminded of a short horror film on YouTube called The Portrait of God and Exodus 33:20, "No man shall see my face and live." At first, this quote from the Bible sounds threatening, but when applied to the ideas of eldritch cosmic horror, maybe the interpretation is different. Not that God does not want to be seen, but instead that God can't be seen without severe unintended psychological strain. Almost as if his lack of being seen is a mercy. It also reminds me of visitations angels make in the Bible, and the reoccurring phrase, "Be not afraid." In a case where a winged ring-eyed monster visits you without explanation, I think it's safe to say a natural reaction would be fear. Ligotti discusses another philosopher in his book, Philip Mainlander, and a hypothesis they proposed. It goes something like this. If humans found existence dreadful, and an immortal god was responsible for their existence, wouldn't such a being also experience a similar dread? With this dread, would he not similarly contemplate a way to escape existence, in which case allowing his own death? I think Russ references this idea when he tells Marty in the car that he contemplates the idea of allowing your own crucifixion as a form of his own personal meditation. Both Ligotti's mention of Mainlander's ideas and the usurper god association the King in Yellow is often given, I think, in the context of the show, Carcosa and non-existence are the same thing. Rust's character has the effect of tying in all these various, seemingly unrelated ideas, which I think contributes immensely to his intrigue. It's such a subtle relationship, I think it would otherwise be easily missed, which I did my first watch.
Strange.
Are you serious?
He tastes colors.
So, what is synesthesia?
Synesthesia. It's a misalignment of synaptic receptors and triggers. Alkalized colors, certain metallics. It's a type of hypersensitivity. One sense triggers another sense. Like sometimes I'll see a color and it'll put a taste in my mouth. A touch, a texture, a scent may put a note in my head.
I've heard of that. It can be a side effect of statin.
It's not a side effect.
So when something feels good, does that mean it feels twice as good? Like from two different ways?
Throughout True Detective, Rust is constantly made fun of and praised for his attention to detail. In the beginning of the show, we learn a mean nickname his coworkers call him, the Taxman, because instead of a notebook, he carries around a large ledger to keep notes about the crime scene and his investigations. At the same time, his coworkers sing praises that he is the best assist you can have in an interrogation. He personally prides himself on being able to tell if someone was guilty of a crime or not in only 10 minutes in an interrogation room. It's implied throughout the show that Rust, through a combination of his other senses, or possibly through supernatural causes, has acquired somewhat of a keen sixth sense that has contributed to his success in detective work. The show also addresses visions that Rust has due to his old drug habits, but the visions seem almost supernatural, showing him the spiral of birds in the sky and the universal spiral at the end of the show. Personally, I think the show suggests the latter, that this sense is supernatural in some way. Let me show you a few more clips.
Yeah, back then, the visions. Yeah, most of the time I was convinced that I'd lost it. Marty. There are other times. I thought I was mainlining the secret truth of the universe.
In scouring YouTube for clips of the scene, I unfortunately couldn't find it. So you have to take my word on this. As Rust and Marty are approaching the killer's house at the very end, Rust repeats the line he said in the car in the first clip. Aluminum, ash, that taste again. We know Rust has synesthesia from the previous clips, which is the sensory experience of one sense affecting the other. In this case, we don't really see any sense that could directly cause this taste in his mouth, like he's experienced before. The nearness to the killer's house, coupled with the taste he gets in his mouth, suggests a secret sixth sense. Some kind of innate or supernatural intuition Rust possesses is linked to the taste. I realized this my second watch, and I again think it's so easy to miss. But I believe it's another way The show hints at the pessimistic atheist having a supernatural connection he refuses to reconcile. The final scene of the season, when Rust and Marty are sitting outdoors, they seem to switch roles, with Marty holding Rust's old pessimistic outlook, but Rust adopting an optimistic view on the stars. This is linked with his supernatural experience he had in the bunker.
Talk to me, Russ.
There was a moment, I know, when I was under in the dark, that something, whatever I'd been reduced to, not even consciousness, it was a vague awareness in the dark. And I could feel my definitions fading. And beneath that darkness, there was another kind. It was deeper, warm, like a substance. And I could feel, man. And I knew my daughter waited for me there. So clear. I could feel her. I could feel it. I could feel a piece of my pop, too. It was like I was a part of everything that I ever loved. And we were all, the three of us, just fading out. And all I had to do was let go. And I did. I said, darkness, yeah. And I disappeared. But I could still feel her love there. Even more than before. Nothing. Nothing but that love. And I woke up.
Overall, True Detective is an amazing watch, and I'm sure there are subtle things here or there that I may have missed or simply didn't cover in detail, but I hope this video gave you a newfound appreciation for the show, as the process of making it did for me. If you stayed, thanks for watching. This was my very first YouTube video, and an interesting learning experience for me.